Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my standard review of the new Sony FE 50mm f2.5 G prime lens. This is the third of the series of 24mm, 40mm, and 50mm f2.8, and then the latter two being f2.5 series of primes that Sony has released simultaneously. And in many ways, like Tamron did a few years ago with their 20mm, 24 and 35mm f2.8 primes, they have shared some development and manufacturing cost in order to kind of flesh out a variety of lenses for consumers. The downside to this, of course, is that you do tend to rob each individual lens of its own unique product launch. But of course, down the road, nobody's going to care about that. And the benefit to us as consumers is that we get three very nice tiny lenses that are, in many ways just miniaturized G Master lenses. Maybe not quite that level of performance, and certainly not that kind of maximum aperture. But in terms of features and build, these are like miniature G Master lenses. And in that sense, while on paper, a 50mm f2.5 lens doesn't sound all that appealing, and there will be some uninformed potential consumers that'll look and say, why would I pay $600 for a 50mm f2.5 lens when here is this nice 50mm f1.8 lens for $250 or $300? But the reality is that 50mm f1.8 lens can't even scratch the surface of what this 50mm f2.5 lens can do in terms of build, autofocus performance, and optical performance. In fact, this f2.5 lens is sharper at f2.5 than what the 50mm f1.8 is at f8. In other words, even wide open, this new lens produces images that 50mm lens can never touch optically. And it goes beyond that. There is a quality to the bokeh and the rendering, the autofocus, all of these things that is just genuinely nice. And this is actually my favorite of the series in terms of the optical performance. Now today I'm just going to give you the highlights. If you want a more detailed review, check out the definitive review instead, and it gives you deeper details on everything, including a deep dive on the image quality. Today's episode is brought to you by Lens Nest, the stylish and innovative new way to store and display your lenses. This new product is designed and produced by a fellow photographer and is made with high-quality cork, a biodegradable material which has been extracted as a byproduct during the process of manufacturing cork bottle stoppers. This makes the Lens Nest eco-friendly, along with being highly durable, and it smells good in my dry cabinet too. Lens Nest is designed to be expandable to fit your growing collection of lenses and creates a designated space for lenses, keeping them organized and easy to grab. Get your Lens Nest in either natural cork or the limited edition dark gray by visiting bit.ly/Lens Nest to join the Kickstarter campaign and to help bring this stylish new lens storage system to market. Before we progress further, just want to let you know that I am filming with the 50mm f2.5 on a Sony a6600 right now. So it gives you a sense of how it does for tracking my face and for video as well. So we'll start by talking about the build and handling. All three of these lenses have, as mentioned, a beautiful build. It's all metal construction, a thorough weather sealing. In this case, it starts with a gasket at the lens mount, and there are a total of 10 different seal points. Now, the overall dimensions of the lens, as you can see, are incredibly compact. This is a lens that is 68mm in diameter. It is only 45mm in length. That's well less than 2 inches. And it weighs in at only 174 grams. So it's lightweight despite being beautifully constructed. You can bring this along and not notice the weight basically ever. Not quite a pancake size lens, but not a whole lot bigger than that either. And so very attractive in that point. As noted, it's all metal, and as also mentioned, it's got basically all the features of a G Master lens. That includes having the multi-tiered approach to aperture, where you can control it from within the camera by putting it into the A position. You can use the manual focus or manual aperture ring at 1/3 stop to tense, or you can click a button and have a fully declicked aperture if you prefer that for video racking. It also has a focus hold button, an AF/MF switch, touch all of these things just like a G Master lens. And you also have a beautifully damped manual focus ring that is fully linear. It's all metal, nicely ribbed, and it's very precise, has great feel to it. My only downside to any of these lenses, because you know it's basically all the same strengths and weaknesses across them all. So the only potential weakness here is that while it's summer right now, in the winter when I'm shooting with gloves, this is a tiny lens and there's a lot of stuff on it, which means there's a lot of things that are small and close together. It's going to be hard to operate with gloves on, and so something maybe to bear in mind, though at the same time, there's workarounds on most of these things where things can be controlled from within the camera instead. And so, you know, it's not really a huge deal here at the end of the day. The lens has 7 rounded aperture blades, or at least they're stated to be rounded, but they're not as curved as what many Sony apertures are. So even by f4, you will start to see the aperture shape a little bit. But the upside is that it does produce fairly nice sun stars if you stop the lens down. Kind of the most distinguishing feature in some ways is the front lens hood / filter adapter. It is a different style of a lens hood shared with the 40mm. The 24mm has a more traditional lens hood. Unfortunately, because of this particular style, it tapers out towards the front, which means you can't reverse it for storage. And so it's either going to have to leave it home or leave it in a fixed position. It's a tiny lens and the lens hood is not particularly deep. I just leave it in the fixed position for some extra protection, a little bit of shading, and you can use the 49mm filters right on the lens hood, or you can put the cap on there as well. And of course you can do both of those things without the lens hood in place, but it's certainly a different style of lens hood compared to a more traditional style. Overall, however, I give very high marks. This is a beautifully made lens and really lightweight for being so nicely made, incredibly compact, and that's one of the great strengths relative to, say, a zoom lens that covers this focal length, you know, at f2.8. So it has a little bit of an aperture advantage, but it has a huge weight advantage. Autofocus is fantastic on this lens. It has dual linear motors that gives it plenty of speed. It is utterly quiet in operation, and it is very accurate in my test. Let's take a look at focus pulls just to see how smooth and precise they actually are. So as you can see, there's really no detectable focus sound at all, and I never really could pick up on any kind of detectable focus sound, even in this case in a very quiet environment. Only downside for that focus for video is that you might have noticed there is some fairly pronounced focus breathing in which objects change size relative to their position in focus. So that is a downside that, you know, I do want to cite here. Overall, however, autofocus was excellent, and I got really well focused results for both video and stills in a variety of different situations. And so a lot of good stuff that is going on there. Likewise, when it comes to the image quality. As I said, on paper, an f2.5 aperture at 50mm, not particularly exciting. But this is a lens that punches above its, you know, paper performance out in the real world. It delivers really crisp results, so it's very sharp, very good contrast, but it has that unique combination of good sharpness and then very soft bokeh quality that makes it particularly nice, and that's what really stood out to me. The lens is very sharp in the center and the mid-frame position, and it is just, you know, somewhat less sharp in the corner of the frame at wide open. By about f4, the corners are really sharpening up, and by landscape apertures of f5.6 and f8, you get incredibly detailed results all across the frame. I also found that the close-up performance was good. The magnification is not quite as high as the 40mm, but like all three of these lenses, you actually get two different magnification figures, one for autofocus and another for manual focus, in that you can get a little bit closer when you manually focus than what you can with autofocus. In this case, by autofocusing, you get a magnification of 0.18 times, and that jumps to 0.21 times if you manually focus. Really, both of those figures is better than average for a 50mm lens, average being about 0.15 times for a 50mm lens, so very useful. And again, while the magnification isn't quite as high as the 40mm, I actually found that the lens was a little bit sharper at minimum focus autofocus, so it gives you a little bit more detail in images there. And so it's a very, very useful figure, and the end results are very useful as well. As noted, it has very nice bokeh, and I found that in many situations, I found the bokeh surprisingly creamy from the lens, and so I actually found it quite a joy to shoot with, even though I would prefer a wider maximum aperture for a little bit more subject isolation, but the quality of the blur did help to make up for that. It also proved to be quite flare resistant, so a good performance there, and it handled all of the aberrations, various chromatic aberrations, be they lateral along the edges of the frame, longitudinal before and after the plane of focus. The worst I saw is a tiny bit of fringing and bokeh highlights after the plane of focus, but nothing that you're really going to detect in normal operations, so very strong performances across the board. At the end of the day, this is a lens that is very high performing, and again, while on paper its combination of focal length and maximum aperture is not very enticing when you look at a price tag of around $600. At the same time, however, there is basically nothing on the Sony platform to genuinely compete with this lens, and it being both a premium, high-performing lens and at this price point. And so I think that for many photographers, if you take the plunge, say you're a Sony a7C shooter, you're going to love this lens. And even putting it on APS-C, it's a great performer there. And so if you want to travel light and compact for street, for example, or even kind of a budget portrait lens, it's a highly attractive lens on a lot of levels, even if it's not a particularly exciting lens in its concept. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you look in the description down below, you can find linkage to my full text review, also to an image gallery where you can check out photos from the lens. Beyond that, there's buying links if you'd like to purchase one for yourself, and also linkage to pick up some of my merchandise, to follow me on social media, sign up to become one of my patrons, and of course, if you haven't already, be sure to click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Ring that bell so you get notifications when new content drops. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and let the light in.